All right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm Jessica, and this is Junae. And we'd like to welcome you to the 10th Constellation. We're happy to bring together these readers, and we're happy to bring together all of you in this room and everyone who's joining us by live stream. Before we get started, we also want to thank Cleveland at Tin House and Tyler and Melissa of Bishop and Wild. And we also want to thank the Regional Arts and Culture Council for grant support for this series. We'd like to thank each of you for your consideration in honoring our COVID policy and looking out for each other. So that's masks on the first floor, and then we have the mask optional space upstairs where there's food and drinks after the series and social space. You might be here because you know one of the readers or one of us, which is a really good reason to be here. And we also hope you come back. We generally gather on the second Thursday of every month. This month is kind of an exception. We do take December off, but we'll be back in January for our anniversary reading. Our board member, Armin Tolentino, will be reading along with M. Lund and Veronica Sandoval.
Oh, yeah.
And there will be cake. It'll be kind of a celebration of our first year. Before we get started, Julie has some things to say to start this particular event.
I hate speaking in front of people, and I'm going to do this. Super excited to be here with you all. I've been craving this moment for weeks now. The world is fucked, and free Palestine, and it's hard to know what to do right now, except for be community with good people. And this reading series has been warm to my soul for almost a year. So it's really nice to share this space with all of you. So I wrote something, and I wrote it with Jessica and Armin. And I'm just going to take a moment to ask you all to hold some space for grief and the lost lives of Palestinians and the genocide happening right now. So bear with me, see if I can get through this. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Junae. My pronouns are she, they. I'm one of the founders of Constellation. I'm an ethnically displaced Korean adoptee. There's a direct line from Japanese colonialism and US imperialism to me losing my first biological family. Another direct line from American right-wing propaganda to me losing my second. I'm a direct survivor of the violence of family separation, colonialism, and imperialism. Two of my children are also of Armenian descent. Their great-grandfather was the only survivor of his family in the Armenian genocide of 1915 and 16. Sometimes called the first genocide of the 20th century. Over 1 million Armenians massacres, individual murders, treatment, resource control, exposure, and starvation, just like the Palestinians have been experiencing for 75 years, as we are witnessing the latest escalation right now. In case you don't know, this past September, over 100,000 ethnic Armenian civilians from Nagorno-Karabakh were violently displaced from their indigenous homeland. Neither Jessica or Armin or I are Palestinian, we're Jewish, and we wrote much of the following together. But because of my personal history, I wanted to take the responsibility and the honor and the privilege of this platform to speak for Constellation. and to speak for us about what's happening to Palestinians at the hand of the colonial project of the nation state of Israel with the support of the US government. We are horrified and enraged to watch the ongoing escalation of military violence, colonial occupation, imperialism, cleansing, and genocide against the Palestinian people. We, like you, have witnessed things that no human should witness, let alone experience. We will never be the same. We're not experts in the history and politics of the Middle East, but we're learning and listening to those who are most harmed, Palestinian people. We know that people are not their government. Palestinians are not Hamas, and the Jewish people are not Zionist Israel, just as we are not the US government. The United States, European countries, Asian countries, and other Arab nations are also complicit, as well as weapons manufacturers, oil companies, and other multinational corporate interests and financial stakes. Jessica and I started Constellation for our love for the unique beauty, passion, and literature inspires in the world, because we believe in the power of community. We wanted to help create more space for diverse voices and stories in Portland. It is heart-wrenching to see other organizations stay silent and or silence the voices speaking out against the brutal oppression of Palestinians. Overall and always, we stand for justice and liberation. We support Palestinian self-determination. We stand in solidarity with all oppressed peoples. We believe it is possible and necessary to criticize Israel without resorting to anti-Semitic tropes that harm Jewish people around the world, many of whom are anti-Zionist. Liberation of one group of people does not mean the subjugation of another. We might feel helpless against the size of the atrocities we're witnessing. We believe there are things we can do together, and every single one of our actions together is powerful. For one, we must speak out against the oppression of Palestinians while taking great care not to contribute to anti-Jewish oppression. We want to stand in solidarity with this community here and taking action on your outrage for injustice. We don't know all the things to do, but we have a list of some things that we can do. Amplify voices of Palestinians. Bear witness. It's hard to look, but if it is so violent that you can't stand to look, you should be calling for it to stop. March, rally, get educated, join the boycott, divest, and sanction yes movement, contact Congress, share on social media, have the hard conversations, create art. If you're a writer, sign on to the Writers Against the War on letter. We have some QR codes around, and there's one on the back window. The first QR code is to sign on to that letter, and then to donate. And we've learned that donations are not currently getting through, but donations are they're still important for when helping get through. Donations should not be limited to when Palestinians are being bombarded. Daily life in Gaza is already made difficult under Israeli blockade, not just when bombs are dropping. So we've got QR codes to organizations that are trying to help. So before we introduce our wonderful partner, Pacific University MFA, we want to take a few collective deep breathing breaths together in our community to hold space for grief and all our feelings and to calm our nervous system so we can be together and focus on this beautiful reading tonight. So let's just take a moment to breathe. Thank you for being here and holding that space. As I mentioned before, Constellation is about building local community, and it is our great honor and pleasure to have partnered with Pacific University Low Residency MFA for this reading. I have 3 amazing readers that I can't wait to hear. I've had experiences with Pacific through one of their partners, the For Arts program, the literary organization that advocates for writers and artists of color. And I know Pacific has been an incredible partner for them and for work that I deeply care about. We've been working with amazing program director Scott McCord, who's here, who's helped curate tonight's event. We've been kind of working on this since spring. So Scott, thank you for being here. Thank you for helping organize this. Um, and we'll move over to you. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for put together over the past 6, 7 months. For opening the space for grief. Janae said that she was going to use this platform of Constellation to say what she said, and I'm grateful for that. This is not my platform. I just wanted to say that over the past month plus, as a director of a program that prides itself in its diversity, that prides itself on its commitment to community, all I've been able to do is to open space in my life to listen, to make as much space for the grief among the people I work most closely with, and to reach out to those people in our community who may be watching tonight, who are here in person, who are angry, who are fearful, who feel isolated, and don't know where to turn. And it's so if these are you, people I'm talking with, people of the Pacific community, or people who might think about the Pacific community, know that the door to me is open, and you're. That's all I'll say about that. I'm so proud of this community of writers that's coming together tonight. We have 2 alumni of the program, 1 current student, 1 of my close colleagues, and who is also an alum of the program. 3 terrifically talented women who I'm so proud to say are affiliated with what we're doing, and who make what we're doing so special. So our first reader is Rooja Mohassessy. Rooja is an Iranian-born poet and educator. She's a Gobble Fellow, and as I said, an MFA graduate of Pacific University. Her debut collection, I see in her hands, When Your Sky Runs Into Mine, was the winner of the 22nd Annual Elixir Poetry Award. Her poems and reviews have appeared in Narrative Magazine, Poet Lore, Rhino Poetry, Southern Humanities Review, Calyx Journal, Ninth Letter, New City Review, and many more. Rooja is an incredible force of poetry, her own, and the poetry of the people she knows through our program and beyond. As I say, I'm very proud to know you, and I welcome you.
You guys hear me? Thank you, Scott. Thank you for this opportunity and for gathering us all here. And thank you, Janae and Jessica, for creating this safe space for us and for your courage, really. I'm going to start with a new poem that's very new, as in today's poem, pretty much. Impunity. Little smiles that milk bean shape. Little smiles that depart to no return. Maya Hayat. In this interrupted hour, the sky wears two faces. One is white with phosphorus, another gray with pulverized rubble. And someone has lost count of numbers, of orphans with wounds and those who cannot point to where, when, who is caught at what depth under each heap, an infinite number lost to a household. Much of it cannot be expressed, for certain the living cannot be held unto their feet. Their faces lack for conviction where yesterday a dirt road led them somewhere. Helplessness now leads to the brink, a briny runoff, a parched orchard to the border, fortified with fear. See the mounting pile of sin. The father points to a verse in the Quran. He wants to know if his child is deserving of the sea view of peace, and will it drop tomorrow from the veils of the morning? I'm going to read a few poems from my collection when your sky runs into mine. This first one is about the moment when, after the Iran-Iraq in 1978, the hijab became mandatory for women and girls. And this is my recollection of going to the shop to buy this new hijab uniform for school. Hijab in third grade. It's autumn of 1981. Radiators in the hall clang in time for it. Her mother hands the shop lady a list. There is no need to undress. Shaking out a full-length overcoat, she slides the schoolgirl's arms through both sleeves. Wide hems overhang the shirt cuffs of her peacock green peacoat. In the mirror, buttoned up the midline to the schoolgirl's throat, is midnight, falling darkly to her ankles, shutting her chin. An opaque cutout of a cloud is folded into a triangle and cast over her head. Fingers wedge her bangs under repeatedly, pleading the stars to retreat and keep her out of sight. Two stray ends of the night droop aimlessly at her chest. The lady gathers and ties them into a double knot, a lock under the chin. It's time to come to terms with the dark. Schoolgirl looks up to give thanks, but the lady has forgotten every shape there is to smile. This next one is about war. It's about chemical weapons that were used extensively during the Iran-Iraq War that lasted about 9 years, and the chemical weapons that were supplied to Iraq by the West, by Germany. Actually. I always thought it was a good idea to have a drink before a reading, but I'm not so sure now. And the title is the words of a woman who arrived at. They were blind and mad. Some of them were laughing. There was nobody to lead the blind people. Chemical warfare is childhood. Smelling of sweet apples, geraniums, fresh mustard fields, stage, chlorine, the conflicted scent of humanitarian aid that cleans and kills as needed. Then there's garlic, and sometimes something rotten like trash. At times, the formula even amuses froths in spite of itself into unrestrained laughter like a nightmare at room temperature before we enter to metal. It's quite airy, though heavy and soluble, its chaste softer and colorless, we add or touch a favorite flavor, the missing colorant. Take the Mexican mustard gas, the poor man's method of reprimand, to blind and blister beyond recognition, shoulder to shoulder wave of sons of mothers, the older brother, middle nephew, a firstborn, only just engaged, second cousin, his first love, a father, his next child, the newly wedded groom, a male pride, called from near and far villages, advancing for the love of God. And it won't be shy tongues of downy beards, but there's those cries that break the suction seals off the gas mask, tawny beard, their soft acid dissolving eyelids. Oh, the sinful day we meet about sugar-coated in a bright cloud of mustard flowers, promise of Savior mounting to heaven with every petal. The gas won't degrade for 100 years as the child faithfully lets himself live. Unwittingly, we make admiration alter his genes, fumigate his fatigue. Yellow poison seeps like stealth into spreading his degraded in our own image, then we caress him tethered to catheters and nasal patches. Who now shall lead the blind with blistered eyes through barbed wired lands, where the leopard refuses to lie beside the young mothers come. They back in mangled sons from the fields, they have lost their way to you. I think these poems are hard to write and even harder to listen to, but I think they are important. And I think, as Renee said these days, important not to turn away from what's painful. It is, we have different responses to these things. Mine is often rage and anger. The poem that I started with just now, it actually was a lot more angry, and today in the coffee shop, I just got a lot of it out. I think through the anger, try to get to a deeper place of grief. It's a process. This next poem is about my experience of being a very devout Muslim child, and I wasn't quite sure how much of it was actual. I think a lot of it was true spirituality from my family. We were devout, or actually just my grandmother. She was devout, and I loved her, and so I would fast with her and pray with her. And but I think some of it was also brainwashing of the regime, because suddenly at schools we have so many more hours of Quranic recital. The library was turned into a space for to pray and a prayer hall, and so it's hard to tell. And I don't know if I left early, but brainwashing is really what makes all these children go and throw themselves, wrap themselves up in suicide vests and throw themselves in past. So it's religion, a tricky thing. I think we all know. Intoxicated by verses. Even the Farsi translation, the barely legible print beneath each calligraphed line calls for translation. How scholarly she is at 10, squatting cross-legged, hunched over the book of spells, she spreads daily on her knees. Thou shalt not touch the verses. With the full length of her arm, she turns each page from one corner of the magic world to the next, careful not to scare the sacred, the gilded accents, little blades suspended, twinkling over the script. Thou shalt not recite the foreign tongue. She loves the Arab tongue of God. She loves her lips sliced with surahs, the consonants he thrusts to the back of her throat, the long vowels he sustains on her breath. Her incantations soar, her white chador floating tense, sunny with daisies, beaming with childhood. She pauses to drink at the turquoise back, the hand-painted margin of the page, hems her faith and brims with embossed blossoms. And dervish-like, rocking with each cerulean verse that rises out of her pliant throat, she is the reverberating masjid dome, poised over her paisley janamas, Birds of praise come nesting, they come cooing, darting out and into her chador. Each surah, the utterly incomprehensible spell she cants from her proud minaret, her cupped hands an invitation for God to join her, dance with her on the naked waters of her childhood. Before long, dancing too shall be forbidden. This poem, I don't often read. It was my response to, there was a Sri Lanka terrorist bombing some years ago. You guys remember that? A couple of churches were bombed. I did exactly what you heard. It's a response to that event. And like, is it east versus west or man against man? Can any nation stand alone? Jim Pittard and Frankie Sullivan. I get the news from my deaf mother on FaceTime, my 2008 MacBook Air, her portal to the ways beyond her rented basement flat in Clovis, the home of GMO agriculture, where asthma or another respiratory ailment knocks at every childbearing household by a toddler's third birthday, demanding ransom or sometimes an outright sacrifice. My mother keeps windows shut all season, no signs regardless. She signs in annoyance and tucks the tissue down one sleeve. It took weeks to teach her arthritic fingers to single, not double tap the touchpad. You need to learn to read the alphabet, I repeat. She attends ASL lessons, races, and follows her Mexican friends just fine. I keep passwords to 6 times 0 and coax her away from sites insistent on special character. But the truth is, she's better off here. Eating her 2 tabs, not feeling exhaust on the lookout for Tehran's morality police. She scrolls, likes and shares on Facebook like a child and totters along on Persian BBC with great fluency. We communicate with essentials, adverbs, prepositions, mistakes, the truth. Today, she tells me, 300 blown up. Her arms briefly vanish from the screen. I've heard, I sigh. Sri Lanka, she tags each guttural sound to the next 8 letters designating in midair, and I am that embarrassed child again, with tug and tug at hem till she lowered her voice. I say it's close to India. The land misses it. My heart's burning. She signs, her face sorry as if she was uncomfortable. Then she asks the question I felt coming all along, and since I have no Farsi words to spare for a terrorist, a militant Islamist, a religious extremist, or a ISIS member, I carefully construct the truth in my mind. 8 Muslims wrapped each other in explosives and blew up 259 Christians in retaliation of a Christian who blasted 50 Muslims last month. Feeling an odd pinch of pride in my precision. But I look into the expectant face, grateful I cannot recall the Farsi word, and float Fifi, fluffy before the screen. My mother's lined face breaks into a brief smile. On Skype, your aunt says there is no rice, she signs, no bread back home. The north flooded, the sky, land, and sea, inseparable. Yeah. This last one is the fruit quince. I've been harvesting quince and processing quince. I think this something a bit more uplifting. There are not many uplifting poems in this collection. Quince. This April blossoms away on the quince, its slender arms covered in volumes about to break into hives as the rains pass. Last fall, I drove 5 hours to Clovis and dropped my harvest of 7 at my mother's door. They peaked, posing on the mantle for still life. Their perfume still a head turner like a woman, her prime soon behind her. Emma always kept to a few objects, the blue adobe jar, its rippled mouth, hardest to render, and pull through, a medlar or two, their spears in a tangle, but when the quince arrived in the market and transported the Majorca platter to the studio, and I, the young assistant, stood sentinel as he balanced each fruit on thumb and two fingers, careful with the green points of the golden skin. He tipped and tilted till the light bared the most etched profile, and one by one, pressing their hips into each other, they sat, lonesome ends up, and where the flesh dimpled, where the severed stalk still held to the last leaf, he left ample room, for in a moment the breeze would enter and pass through the arrangement in the vase.
Thank you, Rooja. The next reader is Brenes Mora. As mentioned, he is a current student in our program, and I've had the great privilege of reading her work along the way. And there's means incredible courage in what she writes. So I'm very pleased, well, just to say that. Brenes Mora is an award-winning actress, film editor, and writer from Costa Rica. She's currently, as we know, pursuing her MFA at Pacific, working on a novel set in a zoo, and a collection of essays about immigration, mother-daughter relationships, women of patriarchy, Latinx culture, and pop culture. Her work has been workshopped at Tin House. Here we are. The Macondo Writers Workshop at Emperor Arts, the Lighthouse Writing in Color Retreat, and she was a semifinalist for the Key West Literary Seminar the Key West Literary Seminar Emerging Writer Award. She lives in Seattle with Matilda, Eli, and Winston. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm really nervous. The mic? Yeah. Better? Better? Okay, so I'm reading a short story today. I'm gonna leave you wanting more, I'm sorry. It's called How to Make Tamales After Lucia. Start by breaking down the chicken. Toss the pieces into a large frying pan, sizzling with butter. Fry the chicken skin side down until it's golden. When the skin crisps on the outside, it's time to add the broth. Ma? Charlie's footsteps stop at the kitchen's doorway. Before I know it, my hand whips a wooden spoon in his direction. I hear the spoon bounce off flesh and a blur of snowman pajamas disappear up the stairs. I should feel bad. I didn't mean for it to hit him. I just can't have him here, not today. Today's all about her. Her Christmas Day tamales. Cover the chicken and broth. Simmer for 15 minutes. Set the timer. Chop half an onion, one sweet pepper, 3 celery sticks. I let my wrist do all the work. My pointer finger tucked under the bolster, like Anne Burrell says. My Lucia loved that stupid TV show where Chef Anne takes terrible cooks, and she teaches them. She would binge watch that show instead of doing her homework. And then she would police me and sharpen my finger whenever she saw me mishandling the knife, like Chef Anne does. Luz isn't into cooking. She's passionate about following rules. Was. We didn't find out she was sick until it was stage 4. We brought her home. She died in the TV room, and now she's dead. It happened. There's blood on the cutting board. It's flowing out of my thumb. Didn't even feel it. I'm mesmerized by the bubble that forms at the tip of my thumb. Lucia cut herself too, a small prick from the utility knife as she was shaping a styrofoam ball into the nucleus of a DNA cell for a science project. The next day, the cut was still bleeding. When her band-aid seeped blood the third day, we took her to the ER. Stitches. I thought she needed stitches. I throw away the bloody chocolate vegetables, rinse my thumb until the bleeding stops, grab a clean cutting board and start over. Onion, pepper, celery. Saute the vegetables. Add 2 cups of long rice, 4 cups of water, and 2 tablespoons of achote. Close the lid. Wait. I used to be a patient person. I never minded waiting in traffic or in line. Nothing to do. But now, if I have a minute to myself, my brain plays the same movie over and over. Stitches, bleeding, doctors, stage 4, leave your room, dead. It happened. Timer beeps. Place a good chicken on a rack to let it cool. The cold of the metal rack makes the hair on my forearm stand on end. At the funerary home, when I kissed her goodbye, Lucia laid on the metal table. It was cold. Who doesn't like the cold? Neither do I. No matter how many years of which lived in Seattle, my Latin blood craves the tropical warmth of Costa Rica. My baby girl inherited that. That and love for dancing. When she was around 7, she would steal my skirts and move all the furniture in the living room to open up the dance floor. And she would dance for hours and hours. Back then, we lived with my parents, so there was always a steady supply of Latin music, and Luz did not discriminate. Salsa, cumbia, merengue, it drove me crazy. The drums, drilling, the trumpets, creaking, my raided closet a constant mess, but she was never freer than when she danced, or happier. About a year ago, Luz stopped dancing. It made it too tired and sore. It was the beginning of teenage angst. Masa. I have to make the masa. The entire maseca bag goes into a large stock pot. Pour cold water, a few drops at a time. I dig into the mix of the masa, and it hugs my fingers, warm and cold at the same time, like floating in the Costa Rican sea. The surface water warm while the undercurrent flow cold. It's funny. I don't like the ocean. I'm terrified of waves. When Luz was 6, we went to Costa Rica to visit Abuelita. This was before I met John, when it was just me and Lucia. Well, the two of us and my parents. We went on a day trip to the beach with my cousins. We rented a minibus and prepared a picnic that would have lasted us for weeks. The kids buried each other in the sand and scoped at mermaid tails. I worked on my tan and allowed my abu to feed me every 5 minutes. Before leaving, Tia Greta called us together and the whole gang posed for a picture at the end of the walk, our backs to the waves. 1, 2, something knocked me off my feet and I was underwater, eyes burning from the salt. I reached to my right and grabbed a little limb. I held to it as hard as I could, my own feet splattering. I didn't know which way was up. Gilberto pulled me up to a painful gasp of air, dark spots pulsating on my line of sight. There were screams and gales all about La Chiquita, que suerte La Chiquita! Tia Greta yelled in my face. I was floating loose underwater. Tia touched my hand, and I released my little girl into a circle of aunts and uncles that pulled her out into the beach. I don't really know how it happened, but the coffin turned into a laughter, and soon everyone was holding their bellies and brushing away the tears while I was paralyzed in place. I hate the ocean. I hate the waves. Add the chicken broth to the masa little by little. Messaging the mix until there are no crumbs. Moist enough so it's malleable, and dry enough so it won't stick to my hands. Since Luz's death, I can't bring myself to hurt Charlie. I should. He's only 6. but this visceral heat rises from the pit of my stomach every time I see him playing or laughing or hugging his dad. And then I get mad at John because this is not his grief, it's mine. She is mine. And hatred seeps in like the broth on this masa, immersing me in memories of John and Luz, like when she was 5 and he bought her a scoop of Oregon strawberry ice cream in a waffle cone. And she smiled so bright. Lucia, the bringer of life. When the dough is ready, I cover it and let it rest. I'm not certain if you're supposed to let this dough rest, though. I remember making tamales with Abuelita and my cousins, a dozen of us around the long wooden table, and the fire opened in a smoke-filled sauna that masked the sweat, dust, and salty skin of children who'd been playing in the sun all week on Christmas break. This is my first attempt at making tamales. I'm not a good cook. I never liked cooking, especially Costa Rican food. Since moving to the US when I was 14, I've done everything I can to keep that part of myself hidden. I shed the accent and the food, but it's Christmas time. Luz loved going to my parents' house on Christmas and eating tamales for breakfast. Clean the plantain leaves and cut them into rectangles. Clean them front and back with a wet towel before wiping them down with a little bit of oil and a sponge. My fingers trail over the strings of the leaves, up through the air before coming down over them again. I'm amazed how the leaves come to life. It reminds me of her hair. As a child, I would go to school with wild hair, uncontrollable frizz, pigtails at different heights. My mom would never have the time to help me get ready for school. She bought me an alarm clock instead. When Lucia was born, I swear her hair was not going to be a weakness for bullies to target her for. I would woke up hours early to make her breakfast, bake her, and braid her hair. A little Barbie doll in my hands. A cute myeloid leukemia Barbie. It happened. That stupid cut that wouldn't stop bleeding. We took her to the ER. She cut one stitch. I should have asked them to test her right away. I should have been suspicious. I should have asked and pestered and doubted. Instead, I dropped her off at my parents to watch La Selle play a World Cup game against the British Virgin Islands. Lucia came alive with talking strategy and players with her grandpa. When I was a child back in Costa Rica, my dad used to make me go with him to soccer games, and then he would disappear, sitting right next to me, but unreachable. It infuriated me to see Lucia lose herself to a game the same way my dad did. I suppose I should have been grateful that they got to share that time together. I can still see them together, her face pitched up, hope emanating from them. The Instapot screams, the rice is ready, and that quickly I'm home again, making tamales. It's December 24. 11 months ago, we found out Lucia was sick. A cut that wouldn't heal, stitch that turned into a mystery, that turned into a blood test, that turned into a bone marrow biopsy, that turned into 1, 2, 3 unconscious. Not everybody uses eggs in their tamales. Tamales are meant to keep, and hard-boiled eggs become rubber when frozen. Lucia loves hard-boiled eggs. Set the water to boil in a medium-sized pot. Open a pan of garbanzo beans and the frozen peas and place them into 2 small bowls. Pull the chicken apart. The succulent white flesh gives in without resistance. The dark meat, on the other hand, is not easy to separate. I tear into it big chunks using my fingers, juices running down my wrist. The mango meat goes into yet another bowl. I'm running out of cups. The rumbling of the boiling water is my cue to put the eggs in. Set a timer for 10 minutes. What came first, chicken or the egg? I never wanted to be a mother, not really. When I found out in my senior year of college that I was pregnant, my very first thought was, don't be. I'm angry at God for doing this now, 14 years after I thought it. 14 years of derailing my career. 6 of those years spent as a single mother back with my parents, putting up with their disappointment and shame. And the last 8 of those years, in a 2-story house with a white picket fence. For 6 of those 8 years, Luz was little brother Charlie's best friend. I never wanted to be a mother. Here I am, wondering who am I if not Lucia's mom? While Charlie is being ignored for the umpteenth time in a row because I can't stand the cadence of his steps, his sticky hands full of boogers, his constant nagging. I just can't. I'm so angry all the time. My jaw hurts. Hard-boiled eggs done. Wash the carrots, peel the carrots, chop the carrots into circles. Are they called circles? Medallions? Discs? Julienne the bell pepper. How is it that I know the word julienne but not what carrots circles I call? I should start watching cooking shows again. Near the end, the food channel was on non-stop. She would half write and remember the recipes she loved, and John would cook them for her. John's a great cook. When he's cooking, the world disappears, kind of like my dad does with soccer, except it doesn't piss me off because I know he's cooking for her, for us. When he first joined our family, John was so patient with her, so present. He was just there, cooking, laughing, noodling with the guitar in the background while Luz was doing her homework. He let her get used to him, to his smell, his voice, just day after day being present. It worked. She spent her last day watching the Food Network in the TV room while he cooked anything and everything she told him to, even though she didn't eat any of it. She couldn't. She died while Bobby Flay outcooked a Mexican chef that thought his abuelita's cochinita pibil was unbeatable. 2 brown people down. It happened. This is America, my mom said, over initiating when I called her to tell her about the leukemia. They have the best doctors, the best technology. She's going to be fine. Ponelo en las manos de Dios. She was so calm that I believed her. Ma has an unwavering faith for the United States of America. She bought into the dream and justified any left turn by putting it in the hands of God. And fuck me if it hasn't worked for them. When we came to the US, our life savings were strapped to our bellies in a steam-covered fanny pack under our skirts. My dad was a Jimi Hendrix fan, so he chose Seattle as our destination. Said this place gave him good vibes. We were among the fortunate, not running from matters or war or poverty. It was plain good, all ambition. My mom and dad put their savings to work and rented a 2-story place. Home upstairs, restaurant downstairs. They cooked tacos and burritos and tortillas because it was easier than teaching our neighborhood what Costa Rican food was all about. Still, not every now and then, they snuck salsa lisano into their recipes. And as the year passed by, they added a few Costa Rican dishes because you can take the tacos out of Costa Rica, but you can't take Costa Rica out of the tacos. My dad pardoned every time someone would ask what that thing in the menu was. I hated all of it. I hated waitressing after school, the aroma of chicharrón forever stuck in my hair, my feet swollen from doing inventory, organizing, and restocking every Sunday evening. I hated the sombrero Dad wore while singing Spanish Feliz mariachi style whenever a patron was celebrating. I hated being asked what part of Mexico we were from. Me las manos de Dios, I said. God gave me loose, and with her, my heart expanded and my dreams shifted. The first time I told her that disappointment in me melted, she was their American dream. That coveted blue passport was her birthright. But this is America, my dad yelled at the third oncologist that confirmed the prognosis. The doctor's eyes shifted from my dad's to mine, as if I could do anything. She was tired all the time. Her platelets were shit. She died. The American dream is dead. It happened. And I'm gonna leave it there.
And I won't come back up after Rana's done reading, so I just want to thank everyone on behalf of Pacific, Janae and Jessica for being great partners and putting this together. Let's hope it's not the only time. For Portland, for being out for these three writers. So, that's it. Rana Tahir is a poet and author. With this incredibly flexible mind, with ambition to do more than what's expected. She's a Kundiman Fellow and a member of RAWI, R-A-W-I, Radius of Arab American Writers. In addition to her Choose Your Own Adventure novels, in addition to her Choose Your Own Adventure novels, her work can be found in Bar Magazine, Quarterly West, Salt Hill Journal, among others. I'll say once again, she received her MFA.
Thank you everyone for coming out. As you can see, I am wearing a kufiya. I am not a Palestinian. I am Arab American or Arabish, really. My family's from Pakistan, and I am third generation of my family that lived in Kuwait, which is a country in the Middle East. And then I moved to the US. And I am wearing this to show solidarity. This is a kufiya made in Palestine. And also, I would like to start the reading by saying, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Like Rooja, like Janae had mentioned, I'm filled with a lot of anger right now. But also, I have to remind myself of the hope. I've been talking about Palestine to Americans specifically for 16 years. And it has been a long and lonely road. I never thought we would get where we are today. These demonstrations, they're beyond what I could have dreamed of when I moved to this country when I was 16 years old. It's amazing, and I have to remind myself that even despite the anger, even despite the despair, there is hope. Every time you speak, every time you make sure that when you hear these lies and this propaganda that you push back, you make that hope a reality. So please have those hard conversations. And for those who have been having those conversations, thank you. You are part of the reason for why we got here. So I'm going to start with a poem that is rough. Not rough in its content, really more like rough, like it's still in my notebook. Has not been typed up yet. Just for, I guess, as an intro. And actually, I'm going to set a timer because Scott and Jennifer can let me know. I like the yak. Okay. This poem is called Everything About My Family is Lore. We are not a constellation of stars, but an entire astrology. In the beginning, there was a war. In the beginning, there was a plane. In the beginning, there were two families from the same country, unknown to each other, who moved to the same country. In the beginning, there was partition. In the beginning, there was a witch. Cast a spell and forget how you got where you are. In the beginning, there was a shattered plate, a sinkful of thrown up milk. In the beginning, there was a slap, and Eve spent alone. In the beginning, there was a curse. I hope you have a daughter like you. And she did. She had two. This is the prologue to a romance fantasy novel that I'm working on. So I don't get to read fiction very often, so I thought I'd do it. The prologue is titled Moonborn. Ashura pretended to be a bird, an eagle, soaring above the thick blanket covering the sky, able to see only stars, and not caring about her obscured image of the earth below. If she could, she'd really be there. Perhaps in her new life she will be an eagle, the particulars of the spell still unclear to her. She had never attempted magic before, though she'd had the spell with her since she first left home, or rather, her father's home. This cave would be the fourth home she would leave, and she hoped the last. Her eyes returned to the clouds, returned to her real perspective, below the sky and above the rest of the earth, standing on a mountain's edge, swamped in darkness. The clouds did not give the sky back. 5 days ago, Ashura had seen the building in the twilight, and instead of morning, her world became perpetual night. She stood inside the cave, leaning against the edge of its gaping mouth, slowly rubbing her palms together, tips of her fingers meeting each other before alternately gliding down to its sister's wrist and back up to meet again. Repetition numbing her entire body, except for the sensation in her hands as she tried to read any signs of rain or a miracle of moonlight. Somewhere above her, behind the clouds, the moon was full tonight. It did not matter that she couldn't see it, the difference between belief and knowledge, for what could belief give her after all these years? She could not put her trust in much but this, the diligent tracking of the celestials and their phases by her own hand. This she could trust. All she needed was the moon's presence, its round surface whole in the sky somewhere far above her. Tonight, firmed by this knowledge, her feet entrenched in earth, she felt she could not sleep, though she wore a sluggishness around her like a pelt warmed by fire. She had been up at what she thought was dawn, giddy with possibility, to gather the last remaining makings of the spell. Her toil led her to every usual place, the bog to the north of her, where she left after frogs, the lake to the east, where she improvised nets for fish, storing to eat and to toss back for a chance at a longer life in which they might grow. Along Bezora trails, where she gathered wild roots, crosses, Lyrian thistle, and kinker. The last piece took the most risk. She prowled onto the cultivated poppy fields, careful to stay out of the sight of farmers as she plucked the flowers before retreating away from what was once the closest remnant of civilization. Once, but no longer. Climbing back up the mountain to her home, she let the day pass into what she hoped was nightfall, straightening her long henching back in stretches and preparing. Now she was ready to begin. Ashra let the movement of her hands lead her down to stillness, closed her eyes and breathed deeply before pushing herself upright and taking a step out of her cave and into the open air towards the stack of wood waiting patiently to burn. Beside it was her satchel, some of the roots and flowers poking through the top, the smell of dead fish and still live frogs croaking in the net, overwhelming her as she came closer. She had killed before. One could not live in the wilderness for 2 years without learning how to make a living out of murder. Still, she felt a trepidation, stiffening her shoulders. She killed for sustenance. Now she was killing for something else, another kind of threat. She knelt down, casting her long braid behind her, and emptied the satchel of its contents, then tossed it aside, running her hands carefully along the dirt. She found the leeches first. 6 were already wriggling and plump with her blood. The last 2 were waiting. Taking one between her forefinger and thumb, she brought it slowly to her arm and winced as it latched on. She took the other, placing it on her shoulder. It would take time for the leeches to gorge themselves slowly and drop off, so she continued to the other pieces. She laid out the thick, wet roots of a willow tree in a straight line from the fire, forming a large circle around the stem of olive wood, in its center, letting the edge of the ring touch the corners of the pyre, and keeping one small piece aside for when she would need to ignite it all. She dotted the circle of roots with poppies, little crocuses, and the last of the dried hibiscus and blue flowers she had kept from her mother's garden, somehow surviving the past 2 years. 2 years since Asha had gone into hiding, when she was still a round and soft babe of 6 and 10. If she closed her eyes, she could almost remember her face in the gold framed mirror of her bedchamber, saturnine, glowing with redness on her chin and ready to run. She had not seen herself since then in anything other than the hazy reflection of water or a silhouette of her shadow. For 2 years, she had been free from herself, but she knew one day this freedom wouldn't last, not with her face, her mother's nose and father's eyes. She almost crushed the last lotus with a kiss. No, she could not keep her mother. It was all her father, and she was old enough to know that now, despite the gut churning need to blame both, to attain some semblance of balance, staring in her mind's eye at her young face, remembering the mirror's smudged surface. With that image she kept in her mind as she placed the final touches for the spell. Grabbing a fish with one hand, she gouged out its eyes with the other, placing the eyeballs, the irises as dark as her own, just above their former dwelling, balanced on a delicate face on top of the fire, and mirrored the placement with another fish. She pulled one frog out of its net by its legs, dashed its head across a rock, killing it. Laying the body down, she pried its mouth open with 2 fingers and pinched the tongue, the same dark pink of her lips, pulling it out to its full length. With a swift swipe of her knife, it pulled loose from the body. She did this to all 5 of the frogs she had captured, and then laid them out in another ring around the fish. Frog, tongue, frog, tongue, frog, tongue, frog, tongue, frog, tongue. She sighed at the amount of meat before her, trying to tell herself it would not be a waste. The first leech dropped from her arm onto one of the frogs. She caught the second in her hand. Returning to the leeches, she placed them on the line of roots leading to the fire. Now she had one last chore. The last part being the first she had collected almost 1 month ago, when a pair of hunters came too close to her hiding place, reminding her of the calendar and of man. She returned to the cave for it. She could hear it shuffling under the overturned basket that had been its cage since she had first seen it, wriggling its nose in the air after escaping the 2 huntsmen, wild-eyed and terrified. Luring it towards her had been easy, a simple trick of food and shelter for a desperate soul. She had refused to name it, though it had warmed to her. Picking the basket up slightly, she shoved her still bleeding arm under and grabbed it by the scruff of its neck. The pure white hair, as bright as a full moon, whimpered from the sight of her blood. She groaned, slightly angry for the rushed act. The hair had to die, but she could have prevented it, knowing until the last possible moment. A small mercy. She dropped the basket and cradled the frightened creature in her arms, petting it and keeping her grip firm. She walked slowly towards the circle, covering the hare's eyes. She knelt back down to her casting circle, knowing once it recognized the death in front of it, the hare would be hard to control. The last part she would have to do quickly. She slammed the hare in the center of the pyre, keeping it pinned down with one hand and stabbed it through the back of its head with her knife. It died instantly, its blood becoming red blooms on its coat. Now it was time to set the spell and let it slip before the moon flowered on the hour of her birth. She took the willow root she had saved and, with her flint and knife, let it catch fire, saying a short prayer to Sultana out of the habit before laying it down at the beginning of the long burn trail. In time, the other roots would catch fire, and she would tend to the flames. It would be hours before the blaze would reach the pyre and her transformation would begin. With everything set, Asher leaned back off her knees and onto the earth. Looking up, the sky was still fully covered, the air losing its warmth. She added a whispered prayer for no rain to wash the blood away. I am going to read one poem. This is from a series of poems that I wrote based on interviews with people who lived through the first Gulf War, including my parents who were made refugees because of that war and then were able to return to Kuwait. And I did want to read this because it does remind me of how invisible so many of the pains of the rest of the world can be here. And it is based on a textbook I saw in high school when I moved to the US. Skirmish. More. The eye that should be shriveled, dust, a lifeless planet not turning on its axis. The roundness, a woman opened without skin, a man preserved, hunched over, exposed each bone to shape our form. Shoulders stacked inescapable for the most part. The spine, a pattern to build the body. Every casualty seemed minor, 1,000 dead. A minor war with minor consequences. In 6 weeks, for a small country that should have been decimated, cried over like some genocide. The truth is, everything is small in Kuwait, even our tragedies. A man says there were a lot of parties and some suffered a lack of booze in the occupation. Pressed back his hand, swathing some broken image behind a hospital bed with bloody sheets, his father with a pistol to the head. He talks more. Another keeps his ID card in his back pocket when his hair was black like his eyes. He makes a point to show it to me. Another one from that series. Coming home. I have learned to rebuild from my parents. The way to smooth the cracks in the wall when a bullet shatters the window. New panes of glass can be brought in. My father sleeps on tiled floor the first night he returns to Kuwait. At least that is what I imagine, though I know it is the wrong apartment I dream of. The one with pink tiles, pink walls, pink curtains blowing in the breeze coming onto the Gulf. I know he slept on the floor of the looted apartment because he told me. Everything else I imagine. The dust, outlining absence, trapping the memories of what once was. Before papering over what's broken, there is the count. He will try to quantify what home once looked like before burning skies, before the heaviness of rebuilding. What I know is that he will keep a stray bullet, 2 artillery shells. I ask, will he keep them to remind him that outside the sky rains ash? And I will end with this poem that is one of the first love poems I ever wrote my then boyfriend, now husband. And it's a tradition that I actually got from Jack Driscoll, who teaches in our program. He would end every one of his readings with a love poem to his wife, Lois, who was a teacher of mine and who I absolutely love. This is Prayers Under Blankets. My fingers lace with yours as we lay down to sleep, ruffled hair curling into Arabic letters. Fire crackles. I miss the smoke wafting through my house when my father burned incense and my mother had us drink Zamzam. Instead, you and I share rosary beads, sweat, and mumbled kisses scribbled to surahs. We are near the earth, feeling warm because I can hear with you, heated bellowing sky. What would my father say, seeing me here wrapped around your body? No rings, no henna, no send-off. You pull me closer, saying to be careful, saying that fire burns, but I've read enough of the Quran to know that. Then, with half-open eyes, I see God lighting up your face, knowing that He, mercy, love, listens to our naked palms. Ask Him for our souls to keep.
I was really stoked about not having to talk while also crying, but then you got me at the end. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. This is really special. We will be back again in January. Until then, we have Rana's book and Rooja's book. We're staying up here tonight, and we look forward to a book by you someday. So there's some books, either those ones or some of the amazing books that you may see around you. I've been looking at Crazy Talk from my vantage point all evening. And then there's food and drink upstairs, if you're able to join us in the mask optional space. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you, readers.
It was trying to I know. You're I get it. I know,
This is my friend Will. Will, this is Runa. Hi, nice to meet you. He's also a poet, and just friend of mine. Will's a poet. Luna's from the East Coast, so East Coast bonding, and so she used to during the pandemic. So build writing community here. It takes a little time.
Are you officially Oregonian?
I am not an Oregonian. I'm a Washington.
Oh, Washington.
Yeah. We do.
So you like the cold weather?
No. It's not the reason to leave. Not really. I don't like it because the cold is too much for company, but I like it drier and I can tolerate it.
Like right now, I'm in Boston, we're like 10 degrees, but the sun is out. Right? Like, I see the shattering.
There's someone looking out the window, then it's and like, and the weather that we've had so far, really accepted. It's been so dry. Like, even though it's raining, like, you know, 5 out of 7 recently.
Like, he's not confused. They're like, why is it dark all the time? I'm like, I know. We wake up, he goes, it's night. I'm like, no, it's morning night. Morning night.
Will and I got to read poetry yesterday to fourth graders. Oh, it was an amazing experience. I was terrified. They were fantastic kids.
If you are a lion.
Not only that, they had read our poems ahead of time. They had questions for us. Right, and they annotated us. I'm like, oh, I think this is what you mean by it. Jessica was there too, so Jessica. And then they read Yeah. It's great. Yeah. The two things that I use the most are dentists and kids. And I had to go to the dentist today. So I expect some for the rest of the year. For your reading in January, I didn't see it earlier. Are you heading out? Oh, good to know. So I catch you in Saturday. That's what Kelly will tell me how to do. I don't know what it is about the kids. That may be it. That may be it.
That's exactly what they're I'm so